Hello everyone, so today I want to talk about why humans are obsessed with stories. Now, most of our free time is being engrossed in stories, to put it plainly. We watch TV shows, we watch movies, we play video games, we read books, we tell each other stories of our experiences or things that we've heard. Many of these stories will have truthful aspects about them, but most of the stories we engross ourselves in are fictional because, television, radio, books that we read, and stories that we constantly relate to throughout our day as we think back on the experiences we had in relation to conceptualizing characters in one way or another. Now, this gets to the heart of why humans are obsessed with stories. We like to view ourselves as being in the position of someone else, whether it be an experience somebody else is telling us or in a book or a TV show or a movie. We like to basically imagine that we are the main protagonist, or sometimes the antagonist, but mainly the protagonist that is going through all of these trials and tribulations. We like to imagine, okay, what would I do in that instance? And we often learn quite a bit about ourselves by running stories through our minds, whether they be TV shows, movies, books, video games, or other people's experiences. We like to react. This is why we often ask things like, oh, what's your favorite Lord of the Rings movie? What's your favorite Star Wars movie? Or what's your favorite movie in general? Or did you like this book? Have you read this book? And we exchange with one another in a way that helps us all grow and connect through stories that even are fictional. Now, when it comes to religion and certain spiritual traditions, stories become very, very personal. Now, religious stories aren't by definition fictional, but they are meant to teach lessons that we are supposed to keep in our hearts if we are a member of that religion, if we follow that particular path. If you're Christian, you're supposed to accept that the stories in the Bible are something that we must learn from and basically hold as our moral compass. And many Christians, not all, are taught to believe that they are literal stories, that you have to believe word for word, and there is no deviation from the truth in the book that is the Bible. The King James Version is the one I'm referring to right now. But not all Christians believe that. Some Christians believe that they are very much symbolic, and really it is the moral compass, but it is symbolic in the way that the story is told, trying to relate truth in a way that is not trying to dictate history. Now, it is very difficult for us as human beings to separate our perception and our conceptualization of reality from cold hard facts. Our opinions create certain filters that we look through, that we look upon stories through, that we look upon reality through, and a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves actually make up these filters. The story that you tell yourself that you're a Christian, for instance, or that you're liberal or conservative, that creates a filter. You start to view things that aren't liberal, Christian, or conservative, or any number of basically titles you put on the page that is your life. Anything that is opposite to those things, or trying to dictate, to show a truth that it seems to be opposite to these things, these filters that we pick up, we tend to shy away from. We tend to have less belief about. Our perception is not perfect. Whether it be conceptualizing or literally seeing, we are not perfect beings. But we learn quite a bit from trying to relate to reality through these filters that we create through stories, that we create for ourselves through accepting stories as either true or at least valuable. And, as far as anthropology goes, or just a great source for analyzing stories throughout human history, I would highly recommend Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell is a remarkable author, as you'll find if you research his name, and most of you will know who Joseph Campbell is. But he talks about many different stories in many different societies, and how people in societies relate to those stories, and how those stories actually guide through the stories about heroes and villains, princesses and princes, shamans and priests, and overcoming certain obstacles, and allowing that culture to say, okay, well, if that spiritual man who is loyal to the gods overcame that challenge, and if I'm loyal to the gods and work as hard as he did, I can overcome it too. Just different things like that. So Joseph Campbell is somebody I'd highly recommend. Now, here's an interesting topic, the Necronomicon. Now, Lovecraft was a wonderful author, and he wrote this book, the Necronomicon, and he also wrote many Lovecraftian tales that relate to the beings, the ancient ones, and the elder gods that we find in the Necronomicon. The elder gods being the gods that basically created an order for man, that fight the demonic type beings that are the ancient ones, or the old ones, that human beings naturally fight because we don't want to be part of that chaos. At least most of us don't. We value our order. We value our peace. And we value those things that can protect us from chaos and protect our families from chaos. This is an inherent human spiritual need, want, desire. And through the stories that Lovecraft told in the Necronomicon and other books, Cthulhu being one of the ancient ones, one of the old, you can call it the old gods, or old ones, sometimes said. But I think Cthulhu is the high priest, and Marduk is actually not necessarily the leader of the elder gods, but you can say the savior, the lead magician. And the god of magicians is Enki, which is, I guess you could say, the number one god of the elder gods. But regardless, Lovecraft hit on something very close to home. So much so that people have founded religions, mainly followers of Cthulhu, around Lovecraftian tales, saying that he tapped into a source of knowledge and understanding and information, both alien and terrestrial, that hadn't been tapped into before. And that this is proof, the vast knowledge that he gives in his books is proof that he tapped into something that is very real. And he is the first one to really conceptualize it in a recent book that is available to everyone, the Necronomicon. So he should be considered as somebody, as a seer, not just a fictional author, according to people who believe the Necronomicon is true and who might have joined a Cthulhu cult or is a priest of Marduk, perhaps, on the other side, on the elder god's side. But this is where fiction and reality merge. Perhaps Lovecraft did tap into something, perhaps he didn't. But the fact that it is contested, and that this book was originally published under the title of fiction, but people have found it to be, well, some people have found it to be, close to home when it comes to grander knowledge about the cosmos and the forces just behind everything. So this is a very good crossroads for both of these ideas, fact and fiction, reality and falsehood. Now, when it comes to gods, there are plenty of books. This book is actually about the different ways of worshiping Odin, the different ways of understanding Odin, and getting close to him in our lives. But many people believe Odin and the Norse gods are fictional. They don't actually exist, as not especially, but also people who believe in religions that the Christian God does exist, or the Muslim version of God Allah, which is similar to the Christian, of course, in the Abrahamic tradition, that he does exist, but gods like this don't. As human beings, we've kind of evolved culturally to a point where, or so-called evolved to a point where we don't think that gods of our pagan ancestors are real. But I believe that they are, but I don't believe that they are completely in line with the stories that are told about them. I believe that the stories told about them are symbolic, and they are forms of consciousness, and that the tree of Yggdrasil, the world tree, with all the nine worlds or dimensions, are different forces, and that maybe Odin doesn't sit on a throne in a literal hall, or maybe he does, but not in the way that the stories are told, because it's very human-like, ironically. But I believe that those dimensions, those higher dimensions, do exist. And I do believe that Odin exists, and the Divine Mother Kalima, though that's a completely different story. But I believe that these beings that we call gods exist, but it was easier to relate to those different dimensions and beings for our ancient ancestors because it was important that they be relatable. And if the stories were told in a way that they became more human, then our ancestors could attune to these forces more easily. So some people believe that Odin and the Northern European gods of our ancestors are real. Some believe they're false. Some believe that it's just a story. It's always been a story. Or that perhaps even these gods are just an effort by Satan to take people away from the one true God, Yahweh. But whatever you believe, there's a number of beliefs just on the Northern European gods. Now, once again, Norse myths. We usually think of mythology in the context of being completely fictional, whether it be Norse, Greek, or what have you. But when it comes to the stories and mythology, I think that it's a combination of the two. I think that these forces exist, but the stories are so symbolic that only somebody who contemplates them long and hard can truly take the full meaning to heart, and not just the basic moral lessons, but the true meaning behind the information that we receive from myths. I believe that to an extent they are literal, but I don't believe that they're 100% literal all the time. Some people do, more people in the past have. But when it comes to mythology, I think that there are forces that we can't understand but through a human filter. So we understand them through a human filter, and they represent true forces with true identities and true influences in this world, but in a slightly different way than just humans can relate to them through. Now, some stories are completely fictional, like this book, Star Wars: The Old Republic Deceived, about Malgus, a Sith Lord. This is a completely fictional book, but once again, myself and other people relating to Malgus and his fall and why he did what he did. For at first he was in love and he wanted to be with this woman, but he started to realize that he had to sacrifice everything in order to become more powerful, and he eventually did. So it's a very sad story. It's a very troubling story, but it's interesting because we contemplate what it means for us to fall, what it means for us to be in pain and seek so much that we destroy the life that we have with people, and we become completely self-obsessed. We can put ourselves in that situation because we're human beings, and to do so, to better understand ourselves while being entertained. But the thing is, true understanding is entertainment for human beings because our nature is to understand, to try to conceptualize our journey and allow others to understand our conceptualization so that we prosper and communicate as one. We prosper and communicate as individuals and become more developed, yes, but we start to relate in a grander story that humanity has always been telling itself, that is history, and why we are here. Now, some stories like the Gateless Gate, the Zen koans, these are, you could say, religious or spiritual stories, but they're meant to communicate a message. Some of them seem literal, but a lot of them are really coded in a way that only somebody who is spiritually attuned or has thought about them quite a bit through meditation, which is the intention of the koans, is able to truly understand their essence. And meditating on these stories is said to help you reach enlightenment, help you reach a point to where you no longer have to be bound by this material existence, because you start to realize through conceptualizing yourself through your specific consciousness and fine-tuning your consciousness in a way that allows you to see past this story that we're all telling ourselves about, that this universe is material and that there's nothing behind it, and that material is all that we are. But these koans are meant to show you that there is a consciousness behind it, the thing that is telling the story, and then we're living in the story. But when we step back through trying to understand these koans into that consciousness just above and behind everything, then we start to realize something about ourselves that isn't fictional, even if these stories are, through how these stories teach us about ourselves, no matter who you are. Now, the last book I want to talk about is the Mahabharata, and I think that a lot of this is literal and a lot of it is fictional. But this story is the longest epic poem of humankind. It's the longest one recorded anyway. And the Mahabharata is, of course, Hindu, and it's something that's very dear to my heart because there are many lessons in this, and there are many obvious places in which it crosses over into completely fictional but trying to teach a lesson, and places where it's literal. It's like, this actually happened. It's a mixing of history and meaning that is meant to hit home with humanity. No matter if you're Hindu or not, this is one spiritual religious text that can be said to transcend religion, because really Hinduism isn't about religion, it's about your path towards the source of everything. But this book transcends all those, even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't believe in the gods, even if you don't have a particular politics or spiritual belief, this book transcends, the Mahabharata transcends your need for group identification and allows you to really contemplate the exchanges in society, the necessities of society, and how society can be renewed, and what leaders are bad, what leaders are good, and if anybody really wins in war. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope all of you understand yourselves through the stories that you find within. And don't forget, all of these books are very important, and never think that books are not. And here's the thing. I can tell myself a story. The story that I can tell myself is that I put this pin button of Bane on my shirt, and I become stronger. That because of my understanding of this character, of strength, that I will be stronger if I put this button on my shirt. Now this story may be completely false, but if I tell myself it enough times and I truly believe it, then is it truly false? If it actually helps me focus on strength, is it possible that the stories we tell ourselves make reality? That's something else to think about. But at any rate, thank you very much for watching. If you want to support me on Patreon, there's my Patreon channel up there, www.patreon.com/darkrealist, capital D, capital R. And if you want to find me on Facebook, feel free to type in Facebook, www.facebook.com/hunter.salazar. So that's how you can contact me, and I would love to hear your questions in the comment section below. If you have any desire to, give me a little bit of appreciation, hit that thumbs up down there. And I hope all of you find yourselves, and I will see you in the future.